He basically said, if you thought that was offensive, wait till you read this. Hello everyone, welcome to Read the Right Thing Book Reviews. I'm Eric, thanks for tuning in. A local bookseller recommended this book to me after I read The Gospel According to Biff by Christopher Moore and also Motherless Brooklyn by Jonathan Lethem. So this book was a real fun book to read, and I also love the feel of this book. It doesn't have that waxy, plasticky feel that a lot of books have, but the cover is this real dense, thick paper, and then it has these deckle-edge pages, which are really nice. I actually gave this to someone and I said, hey, read this passage. And the first thing they said was like, oh man, I love the feel of this book. So it was really enjoyable to read. I'd also been planning to read some Michael Chabon because, like I said, last summer I'd read Motherless Brooklyn. And it turns out Jonathan Lethem and Michael Chabon are friends. They're friendly with each other. Their styles are very similar, and I even watched an interview with the both of them, and they both said they often get mistaken for one another. So I'll link those two reviews of the two books that are similar to this, The Gospel According to Biff and Motherless Brooklyn. I'll link my two reviews to those below. So this book is a murder mystery about a hard-boiled Jewish detective. It meets all the requirements of a noir murder mystery detective story. The main character, the protagonist, is this detective dealing with corruptive powers, both from the mob and even in the legal system. It has sharp and funny dialogue, especially with the Jewish humor thrown in. Imagine if The Marvelous Miss Maisel wasn't a comic story but had detective noir mixed in. The dialogue has this humorous, mocking cynicism towards everyone and everything. Nothing is off limits. I should also mention that I tried to make this review spoiler-free, but there will be some mild spoilers in this review. So if you'd rather read the book first, read the book and then come back and watch this. Or if you don't care, I'm trying not to spoil it too much, but it's just kind of impossible to not give away some of the story in this review. In this novel, both the victim and the detective appear on the very first page. You're really thrust right into the plot and the setting. 9 months, Landsman's been flopping at the Hotel Zamenhof without any of his fellow residents managing to get themselves murdered. Now somebody has put a bullet in the brain of occupant of 208, a Yid who was calling himself Emmanuel Lasker. He didn't answer the phone. He wouldn't open his door, says Tenenbaum, the night manager, when he comes to rouse Landsman. Landsman lives in 505, with a view of the neon sign on the hotel across Max Nordau Street. That one is called the Black Pool, a word that figures in Landsman's nightmares. I had to let myself into his room. The night manager is a former U.S. Marine who kicked a heroin habit of his own back in the 60s, after coming home from the shambles of the Cuban War. He takes a motherly interest in the user population of the Zamenhof. He extends credit to them and sees that they are left alone when that is what they need. Did you touch anything in the room? Landsman says. Tenenbaum says, only the cash and jewelry. Landsman puts on his trousers and shoes and hitches up his suspenders. Then he and Tenenbaum turn to look at the doorknob, where a necktie hangs, red with a fat maroon stripe, already knotted to save time. Landsman has 8 hours to go until his next shift. 8 rat hours, sucking at his bottle, in his glass tank lined with wood shavings. Landsman sighs and goes for the tie. He slides it over his head and pushes up the knot to his collar. He puts on his jacket, feels for the wallet and shield in the breast pocket, past the sholem he wears in a holster under his arm, a chopped Smith & Wesson Model 39. So the main character is Detective Meyer Landsman. He is a divorced homicide detective living in the sleazy Hotel Zamenhof. Meyer Landsman is also an unbeliever, both religiously, in himself, and in society. He is probably a forced unbeliever just because of the past events in his life. He is divorced from his wife of 15 years named Bina, who was another cop and is now his boss. The abortion of their son has caused trouble for the couple. The doctor said there was a chance the son would be born with abnormalities, but the doctor also said there was a slight chance the son would be born normal. Landsman persuaded his wife Bina to get the abortion anyway. Landsman also had a sister, Naomi, who everyone loved, but died in a freak airplane accident. Death seems to follow Landsman around these days. Michael Chabon is so good at building this world that you might question whether it's actually real or not. Sitka is a real city, but they didn't have a mass influx of Jewish people. He is clearly a talented writer. Chabon himself says talent, luck, and discipline are what makes a great writer. Discipline you can control, you just have to hope with the other two. This book came to be when Michael Chabon wrote an essay about how he found the saddest book he's ever seen. He found a book called Say It in Yiddish, which is a phrase book on how to say a bunch of phrases you might need to know in the language of Yiddish. Chabon's essay about this book asked the question, where would be the most fabulous kingdom you could have taken this phrasebook to if the Holocaust hadn't have happened? The book was based on there being a place where you might need to say, help, I need a tourniquet, in Yiddish. A Yiddish land, if you will. After he published the essay, he was attacked for mocking the Yiddish language and announcing its demise. Chabon was embarrassed and ashamed. He felt embarrassed and didn't want to disrespect his elders, but he also felt annoyed and irritated, so then he decided to write a book. He basically said, if you thought that was offensive, wait till you read this. Before I get to the rest of my review on the Yiddish Policemen's Union, please hit that like or subscribe button. It would just get this video out to more people like you who would enjoy it. I would really appreciate it. Once this novel gets going, on page 1 I might add, like you saw, the victim and the detective are introduced on page 1. It never really stops and you are constantly learning something or meeting a new character or a new place. There are several clues in the hotel room where the murder took place. One of the clues in the room is a chessboard. The chessboard shows an end game that Meyer can't quite grasp or understand. Chess is something of a metaphor that cuts through the story and characters and place. Meyer realizes later that the chessboard pieces are set up not as an actual game but as a puzzle. It's something called a zugzwang, where the opposing player is forced to make a move that will ultimately lead to their demise. It would be better to pass, to not do anything, but in chess, that's clearly not an option. It's a metaphor for Meyer, the district of Sitka, and for the Jewish population. As Landsman investigates the murder of the occupant of room 208, he evaluates his sordid past and torturous relationships with Bina. Landsman reevaluates his life, his existence, and he also almost becomes suicidal. Landsman's partner is a half-Jewish, half-Linglet Indian with a foot in both the Indian and Jewish societies. They discover that Emanuel Lasker is really a heroin addict named Mendel Spielman, the son of a rabbi with gang affiliations. As a child, Mendel was a genius at chess and known across the town as brilliant. Mendel was even said to have magic powers that healed. Some even believe Mendel might be the Messiah, the Redeemer of the world. Landsman has to figure out what led Mendel to go from Messiah chess genius to heroin addict dead in a hotel room. Mendel disappeared the day of his wedding and was disowned by his rabbi father. Landsman also has to figure out why Bina and others are trying to shut down the investigation. A lot of shady stuff is going on. Chabon has created a mystical, fictional world of Sitka that has its own history and culture. It feels so real. So Chabon created this alternate version of history where after World War II, Jews flocked to the safe haven of Sitka, Alaska. In Chabon's alternate history, Israel collapsed in 1948 and created a new world on the Alaskan Panhandle. 60 years have passed since the mass exodus to Alaska, where we find Detective Meyer Landsman drunk in a hotel. So we have this big Jewish population in the Panhandle of Alaska, and it's really interesting because he creates this whole world. He creates, food. He creates a backstory. He creates buildings. He creates this Jewish culture that feels so real. There's this ominous shadow hanging over the population of Sitka because the future of the Jewish city is uncertain because the USA is threatening to take back authority. To creating entire fictional Jewish cities in Alaska, to crafting interesting characters, to even devoting a paragraph to a Jewish donut, I was all in on his writing. It was so good. I loved it. And it's no small feat. I think it really was an amazing feat to create an entire world while also starting the plot from page 1. I really admire how he did that. Some writers use a lot of exposition in the beginning of their books, and they kind of put off the plot to really focus on the exposition. Chabon does both. He has a lot of plot and a lot of exposition simultaneously. You never feel like you are really dredging through any exposition. You just are thrust into this world because he is describing interesting things about the community. Its food, people, language, architecture, etc. So I recommended this book to my grandpa, and as I was reading, I started to think he might not enjoy it just because it is kind of a slow moving. That was one of my dislikes. The plot isn't slow moving, but you don't get answers very fast. And also when you do get an answer, to me it was kind of an unsatisfying ending to the murder mystery. But also by the end, I didn't really care about solving the murder. I was just enjoying this world that Chabon created and was letting me visit. I did enjoy the ending, but that's mostly because it has more to do with Landsman than the actual murder mystery. And in the beginning, it's not a tough book to get into, but you do kind of start to question. You're like, okay, where is this going? What exactly is happening here? And I found myself confused and uncertain of the plot at times. But I was never bored with the writing. Similar to the novel Motherless Brooklyn, it took me a while to get into the story, But I'd say by about page 100 or so, it starts to pick up and things start to come together, and then you start to enjoy the plot. So that was just a quick synopsis. Maybe a few spoilers in there, but I hope that gives you a sense of what the book is about. And honestly, you meet so many interesting characters. You meet a lot of the people of Sitka. You meet people who are really great at chess. You meet gangsters. You meet a lot of different people, and every character is interesting in their own ways. And Meyer Landsman is also a fun character to be around. You really hope he pulls things together and can figure out his life. So if you're a fan of Motherless Brooklyn, if you're a fan of Jewish humor, like I said, Marvelous Maisel kind of meets detective noir, then I would say definitely check this out. If you're a fan of Michael Chabon, I think you'll really like it. I'm looking forward to reading more Michael Chabon. I think I'm going to go back to that bookstore and tell the bookseller, like, hey, I really like this. What do you got for me next? And I'm excited to see what he recommends. So that was my quick review of The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon. This was definitely the right thing for me. I would say the plot was kind of hard to get into, but overall the writing is just so good. So I would definitely check this out. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. I post videos pretty frequently, so you also might consider subscribing. And thanks for tuning in.